Hello, everyone. I hope that you can all hear us and see us. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be hosting this session, which is a youth-led session about youth meaningful engagement in ocean climate negotiations and youth expectations for COP27. My name is Anna Maria Marino, and I will be the moderator of the session. With us today, we have many young ocean professionals, ocean advocates, and they're members of the Youth for Ocean Forum, people from volunteers from Youth and Environment Europe, as myself, and of course, young activists and experts in ocean literacy. So I'm very happy to have everyone here. And I will remind everyone that this is a youth-led session. So this means that we are basically young people and we speak from a youth perspective. And in order to answer our main questions, we will organize the session in two main panels. The first panel will be mostly talking about what it means basically as a young person to participate in, for instance, climate COPs. And in order to do that, we invited two Youth for Ocean Forum former COP26 delegates. And this will help us to understand the challenges and the outcomes of COP26 and to build on those outcomes and challenges to understand the expectations of young people for COP27 and future ocean climate negotiations in general. Then we will move on to the next panel, which is about more specifically, meaningful engagement of youth. We will try to understand what it means for young people to be meaningfully engaged in ocean climate negotiations. And we will hear from the experiences of young people, activists, ocean advocates, artists. So I'm very happy to for everyone who is joining us and for everyone who is following us. First of all, I would like to quickly introduce our organizations. The Youth for Ocean Forum is hosting this session on the virtual Ocean Pavilion. The Youth for Ocean Forum is a European network of and a free platform for young change makers and ocean advocates to collaborate, to network and to achieve one goal, which is to have a more sustainable ocean that sustains us all. The Youth for Ocean Forum is part of the EU for Ocean Coalition for Ocean Literacy, which is supported by, has been supported in the past couple of years by the DG Mare of the European Commission. And it is a coalition of many different stakeholders that work together on ocean literacy in Europe. YEE is also supporting the session, and it is a youth-led network, European network as well, of young people who work on several different European environmental and climate issues. We work in advocacy, but we also have a set of organizations that are working on the field on youth-led projects, and we also work to build the capacity of youth to take part in decision-making that has to do with their future, basically, so with the environment and the climate. And we currently have a COP27 team who is going to participate in COP27 or is already in Sharm el-Sheikh. And we are very happy to also be part of this conversation. So I would say that we can start. Just one thing before we start is you are free to use the Q&A feature during the duration of this session. And in this way, we will try and take a few questions that we can ask to our panelists at the end of each panel. So thank you very much. And let's move on to the first panel. So first off is Olivia Garcia, who is a French student studying a master's degree in marine biology at the University of Algarve. And she is also a founding member of the European Youth for Ocean Forum. She is passionate about ocean conservation and environmental protection, and she wants to continue helping to protect the ocean and to mitigate climate change. So welcome, Olivia. I hope that you can hear me and you can see me, and I say that the floor is yours for a first introduction, first pitch.
Thank you, Anna. Can everyone hear me well? Okay, thank you very much. So I didn't know I would go first, and I was hoping that my experience would more complete the speeches of my colleague, but that's okay. My pitch today will be about youth involvement in decision-making processes and an experience I had about that this year. So it's not really about COP. I'm not at COP this year. I was at COP last year, but I was really disappointed by the lack of a youth pavilion and a physical ocean pavilion. But apparently this year there is a youth pavilion, so I think it's a great step, and it's nice to see that youth is more and more included, especially I think this year is youth year or something. Anywho, the experience I wanted to talk about was it's with regard to youth involvement in climate policy and decision making. I had the chance to be invited over the summer at the European Parliament by the Renew Party. It's a political party that belongs to the parliament, and they wanted to have 100 of young people over in order to co-redact a manifesto on several topics. And one of the topics was climate change. So we gathered for 2 days and we worked on some youth involvement and climate related suggestions for a new manifesto for future policies. And they really received us well. They explained us that it was the first time for the party that this was made. They were very, very encouraging, and they assured us that they were genuine, that our voice would be listened, that our suggestion would be integrated into the manifesto. They provided us with an expert, so we were dividing in small groups, and they provided us with an expert from the parliament that could give us access to data and information that we wouldn't have otherwise, that could help us make tailored suggestions. And at the end, we wrote down all of our suggestions, and we had the opportunity to select some of them and really pitch them and discuss them with the parliament members directly. So, and they were really, really kind, and they really listened to us and asked us a lot of questions. It was a great experience for me. It was the first time that I was involved in something like this. From what I understood, it doesn't happen that much. And I think it's a great example of what can be done more in the future at every political instance, at every level of politics, in order to include youth more. So of course, I don't work at the parliament, so I don't know what happened since. It's been a few months, but I have great hope that we have been listened and that our suggestions have been indeed included in their future suggestions of policies. But I have to say that there was something that that annoyed me, is that I was the only scientist in the whole 100 people. All the young people invited were members of political parties in their own country. So they were all coming from European countries, of course, and they were all policy related. They were either studying politics or international relations or law. or they were member of a political party. So it was very interesting to confront. I was confronting with a different kind of logic and different arguments, really from a political point of view. And I've learned a lot, but I think that this event could have benefited from more diversity in the background of the participants. And that is it for me.
Thank you so much. No, actually, I think that your intervention is super relevant because I think that this is a point that I would like to come back later, because the issue of integrating policy and supporting policy with science, it's so important and so relevant in COP processes. So thank you for raising that point, because it's very, very important. And yeah, I hope that we will get to discuss it also with the other panelists. So next up is Dr. Jack Laverick. Jack is also a Youth for Ocean Forum member, a COP26 delegate, and he's in his life is a marine biologist and data scientist. He is one of the founding members of the Youth for Ocean Forum. He's a research associate at the University of Strathclyde, and last year he helped opening the virtual ocean pavilion for COP26, and also participated in a very interesting side event at COP26 in person in Glasgow, where he was involved in storytelling, and it was I remember it was a really, really interesting storytelling experience, and I hope that you can build on your personal experience in this panel. The floor is yours for your introduction. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Aya. Hopefully I'm now appearing on people's screens and you can see me. So yes, you're right. I'm a scientist. That COP basically came to my home last year. I was living in Glasgow and working in Glasgow, and it was an opportunity for me to step out of my comfort zone when I was told by the Youth for Ocean Forum that if I wanted to, I would have the chance to speak. So I spoke in the virtual ocean pavilion and in person about my son, who at the time for COP26 was only 8 weeks old. And in 2050, he's going to be 28, which is the age I was when I gave the COP26 speech. So I talked about the damage that I witnessed in the ocean and the fact that we're on track for more of the same during my little one's youth, the sort of idea that we could be repeating the same story again. And I've seen the coral bleaching, plastic pollution, overfishing, these sorts of things, and the declines during my lifetime. And it was somewhat heartbreaking to think that without significant changes, we'll be doing more of that, and it'd be even worse by the time my son's my age. So having done the storytelling, everyone was very supportive. No one tried to say this is the way it should be or tried to defend the current state of affairs. So I was evidently preaching to the converted. Now I wanted to be able to change a mind or influence a decision maker, but everybody seems to be nominally on my side. So what became clear was I didn't see much evidence of mixing between groups while I was at COP26. The policymakers were locked away in their negotiating rooms, and meanwhile the NGOs and the scientists, we were all talking to each other about how bad the future could be. So I do have some sympathy for why people might have chosen to stay away from COP this year. Names won't be named. But in answer to the theme of this session, which was how do you raise ambition for ocean issues and what can the COP experience tell us? I don't think that there's a lack of ambition as such. People love to make grand plans and claims so that they can splash them around the media and try and outdo each other. And they love to say that they've achieved something. People offered me warm words, and there have been public commitments that come from these meetings. But you have to ask, where is the action? The root of greenwashing is that we have broadly the right words, but with no substance, truth, or follow-up. In Paris, we were promised 1.5 degrees. In Glasgow, we were promised an end to coal. And here we are in Sharm el-Sheikh, or at least virtually for all of us. So we're now a year on from the COP26 experience, and now my son can toddle about the house. He has his own opinions about food and baths, And importantly, he's been in the sea. So he kept stepping back and forth as the waves lapped around his ankles, which was very cute. But globally, this is not the year we hoped for after Glasgow. There's been new oil and gas exploration. There's been a scramble for more coal. We've had record-breaking temperatures with 40 degrees C in the UK for the first time. I really did not enjoy that. We've had wildfires, and a recent WWF report suggested there's been a 70% decline in wildlife populations since the 1970s. My favorite trick for that statistic is to flip it the other way around, and you can instead say that there's 3 times more wildlife in the 70s than there is now, which is a hell of a lot. We've had little updates to the nationally determined contributions, which makes the COP cycle go round. People have said last year allegedly kept 1.5 degrees C alive, but it still seems pretty limp to me. So what I've learned is that we don't need more targets. We need a change in mindset. There will always be new issues which take our attention. Wars, economics, topical issues affecting how we want to structure our societies. But we should be able to respond to these in ways which don't sacrifice our goals for the environment and climate. If you're someone who's worried about a recession in your country, there will be a bigger one down the road if we continue to depend on an energy system that belongs to dinosaurs. If you're someone worried about migration, just wait until an inhospitable climate drives the largest relocation of humans in history. If you worry about wars, I'm pretty sure climate change will give us new things to fight about. It's what people do when they get desperate and times are hard. So we shouldn't be asking if we can afford net zero. We shouldn't be opening new fossil fuel fields. I suggest we don't need to raise our ambition. Grander plans which still aren't pursued won't get us anywhere. We need to identify what the ocean and climate-friendly responses are to our day-to-day challenges and then hold those in power to account when they stray. We are an inherently cooperative and social species. Studying the evolution of cooperation is fascinating if you have the chance. There are all sorts of angles about mutual gain, policing, and relatedness. The evidence suggests we should be able to pull together to solve problems bigger than ourselves. If you meet a cynic who tries to tell you otherwise, kindly point out that nothing about our modern existence could be achieved by one individual in a single lifetime, let alone everything that we depend on. The long-term trend through our history has been to cooperate with at least somebody. Right now, there should be a massive drive for clean energy in the face of an energy crisis. It will improve the quality of life around the world, increase our resilience, and help to depoliticize one of our basic needs. There are glimmers of hope. Just to name one, Australia has sent a signal that they see the future in renewables, not coal. It has come about through an electorate holding their government to account. So my biggest message to youth who care about the ocean and climate is to turn out and vote if you're in a country where you can. Prioritize the climate, because though politicians want us to think they lead, they actually follow what they think wins elections, and that's down to all of us as citizens. I apologize that this pitch hasn't been heavy on marine themes, but CO2 emissions are perhaps the main causative agent of what is going wrong in the world's oceans. We can look at overfishing, we can look at deep sea mining, plastic pollution, and the deforestation of mangroves, to name a few challenges, but we need to tackle climate change, as it is insidious in the way it interacts with everything else in the system. Climate action is ocean action, so let's quit carbon. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you so much, Jack. Your pitch was very inspiring, and I hope that that this will inspire people. I'm sure that this will inspire our participants, and of course, this is not a great picture that we have in front of us at the moment, and especially with COP26 and what you realize when you are in the conference, it can take a toll, of course, on your motivation, on your own inspiration to do more. And I took a few notes from your pitch, and like something that really struck me, and thank you for sharing that, is that it's in the end it's up to our citizen to us as citizens to take more action, besides instead of basically hoping for only for what is happening from the politicians. And in a way, this is of course true, and of course, it's difficult to do both things and try and on one hand advocate and spend a lot of energy on convincing the politicians, on the other hand trying to do something as a citizen. So it's important to understand that as well. Thank you. So I think that we will come back to many of the points that you raised, and I think that we can give the floor to Salome. Salome is a marine ecologist and scientific communicator. Currently, her work focuses on implementing nature-based solutions and studying ecosystem services. She's involved in several ecosystem service mapping and projects. And of course, Salome is also a Youth for Ocean Forum member, and she was part of the Youth for Ocean Forum COP26 delegation last year. Salome, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone. Not easy to go after Jack, but I guess what I wanted to share is in line with what he said and continue a bit. So for my pitch, I didn't want to talk about numbers and statistics, because we all have them in mind and we're living them in a daily basis, especially this summer. We all had issue with water scarcity, and so we know that climate change is here. But I wanted to talk about connection and changing the mindset, which for me is something that will have to come if we want to change. And I do agree with Jack when he said that we don't have to raise the target that we have them. But it seemed last year when I went at COP26, as a young scientist, I didn't feel represented, nor really listen, and I felt like it was missing the change of the mindset to actually go through those targets and go through what we need to do to reach them, because we have the solution, but it seems that something is missing. And on this one, something that I really wanted to focus on was what we call regenerative thinking or system thinking, which is a fact of, right now in our way of doing businesses or in a way of living, we have this way of thinking linearly. So we have a problem, we need to find a solution. But the truth is everything is connecting. We have different problems, different solutions for everything. And I think that we need to change our mindset to tackle climate change, and in a way, like tackle us and the way that we are doing things right now, and we are seeing things right now. And to do that, we have to rethink our models. So the business models, leadership models, living models, we have to rethink how we do it, why we do it, and how everything is connected, and put nature as a center. So to go quickly, I think I can share some slides that I have with you. Can you all see?
We can
so
see.
This is perfect, thank you. So this is something that was interesting for me, and I really like. So instead of hope, we need fearlessness and courage, we need connection, and to love the world we are part of. So it's really the regenerative thinking mind of putting nature as a center and not seeing nature as something that we can take from. But also, as I was saying, instead of thinking linearly, really trying to think as a system thinking, seeing all interconnections, so we will find real solution to real problems. And to finish, to going back to the ocean, of course, we have a terrestrial being. We live on Earth, and sometimes we wonder why we should take care of the ocean, and it's hard to feel the connection to the ocean. But although we are terrestrial being, we have a blue mind. Ocean brings us a lot, personally, emotionally, and services also. And I think it's time to put this on the table when negotiation. And I think a lot of young people feel this connection and he's missing that on negotiation. So this is why I wanted to focus my talk on it. So thank you everyone for listening to me.
Thank you, Salome. It's really interesting point. I see that there are common points in our panelists, and first that I can see is coming from the science community and not feeling represented and feeling a detachment from the rest of the stakeholders that are participating in the conference, for instance, and not feeling that connection that there should be. And another point that I think that is common among all of your speeches is the fact that everything is connected, and so solving the climate crisis is also entails so many other fields, and we have to take everything into account. So considering this and considering how everything is interconnected, my question for you is, first of all, how do we build from Glasgow's challenges and from our thoughts about our experience in Glasgow, and how do we move forward according to you? What could be the best way to move forward? Of course, this is the $1 million question. It's not one thing that can solve everything, but I would like to hear from your experience and from your opinion, what could be the way to move forward as a young person, as a young scientist, of course, in this ocean climate negotiations. I will start perhaps from the last one, so from Salome, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So not an easy question, of course. I would say that it's a work in progress. Let's say that last year was a bit an open mind. Like for me, I went to COP without knowing what I was going to expect and what's going to happen. And when I left, I was less hopeless. I was more hopeless than I was at the beginning, which was not, I guess, the attention of COP, but it's what happened. And with everything that was there, and it seemed that it's a good thing and it comes from good intention, but nothing really would move after that. It was like something was stuck. And I guess after that, 1 week after, I received a yes from the job I'm right now. And I decided that if no one would do that, if COP would not change things, let's work as a young scientist, as what you can do, even if it's a small thing, even if it's just working on one solution for one particular area or something, like just focus on one step at a time and do what we can, do what you can as a young scientist or as a young, and work in progress to try to find out how to live with this when you feel like big stuff like COP, big negotiation fails you. Just a walk at a time would be my answer.
One step at a time, absolutely. Thank you. And Jack, what do you think of the lessons that we can learn from COP26 and basically somehow apply them to COP27 and future negotiations?
Sure. So I'll say this is an answer I've given to a few other questions on similar stuff before, which is that as a young scientist, you do these experiments or field studies or modeling exercises, and they keep coming out with a fairly consistent answer that things aren't going all that great in the world in terms of climate change and biodiversity. That's putting it mildly. And we could continue as scientists, or as a young scientist now, to have a career that will last another 40 years. And I can continue to do more studies, and I can keep saying people, you know what, it's still bad, or it's going to keep getting worse unless we do something different now. So I think the message is out there. The science is fairly unequivocal. We're about to drive ourselves into a wall, so let's please change direction. But in terms of what we could do to help that mission, to actually make sure things do change, you're really then starting to get into the world of psychology and this sort of and political stuff, and it's not my expertise. If I could clone myself and have put myself through a second PhD and a second load of learning, it would have been psychology and all this negotiation stuff, because it just has to be as important as the science at this point, making sure you get to where destination is that we want. So my two key points for that, the things I guess I'd want to convince the policy makers or the other people about, is firstly, not to talk about the cost of net zero. Cost is a subtle piece of language which is being used to undermine the mission. It is an investment. The idea of a cost is that you spend that money and then it's gone. The idea of an investment is you put the money into a thing and then you've got something more or better afterwards. And that's what all of this stuff about renewable energy and about green initiatives is going to be. You will make more money if you do this. And if you continue going down the fossil fuel road, you will be poorer and damage the environment. So stop calling it costs. It's about investment and growth. And these are all things that politics tend to really want to. You have to start asking yourself why they're not thinking about it like that. And make dark conspiracy theories if you want, but that's one point. So investment, not cost. And then the second bit is, I just sort of want to ask some of these people why they want to be world leaders. There is sort of, a lot of people care about legacy. And in the past, they build statues or they build museums or schools and all these sorts of things. And now I sort of feel like there's a bunch of people who want to be in charge for the sake of being in charge. Now that they're there, it would be fantastic. You could be remembered throughout history as the generation of world leaders that fixed some of these problems that faced us. So that's a fantastic thing to have attached to your name when you go back and you start reading textbooks and things. Like, don't you want to achieve something as a world leader that will be looked at positively and remembered? This is it. You have this moment. It's a mission right in front of you that we'd all be very happy for you to grab and to run and to succeed in. So please do. We've given you the science that says there's a problem. People are giving you stuff to do that could solve it. So just please do it.
And also because if they don't do it, then we don't even have a legacy anymore to communicate this to. So yeah, that's, I mean, I don't want to be too fatalistic, but this is, I agree with you, Jack.
Well, I didn't mean to be fatalistic. There are good things we can do. We just need to do it, right? It's almost optimistic if you spin it the right way.
Thank you. So speaking on the side of this other point about the disconnection between the scientist and the policymaker, I wanted to also involve Olivia in the discussion because I know that you have something to say about it, and that was one of your observations from your experience last year. So yeah, is there anything that you wanted to share about what we could do to better integrate that, to better integrate science and policy, and to overcome this huge gap that now exists? And in a way, I feel that it's not closing.
Well, I think my answer to this question is kind of linked to the previous question that you asked Salome and Jack, because coming back to the experience I talked about earlier at in Brussels at the European Parliament, I was the only scientist. So I was talking and listening and debating with people that had more of the policy background, policy law, decision-making background in their heads. So they had a really, really different way of thinking than me. I had the really scientist, ocean lover, nature lover point of view, you know, and scientist numbers, and they had more like the policy number cost, as said Jack, sorry. As Jack said, they were more talking about those practical law issues that for them are really important, but for us scientists are secondary because we see the whole picture, the whole climate thing as a whole, and we see like how it's gonna impact everything that they're talking about, but not in the way they're saying. It's gonna impact them, their costs, their policies, but in the future, in a way that they're not expecting it. And it was really hard for me to be not listen, but understood, because we really had a different logic about that, you know? So I think we would largely benefit having those kind of political events where everyone's opinion is merged. We would have scientists, policymakers, and I don't know, teachers, and I don't know why I say teachers, but you know what I mean. A lot of different backgrounds that can all provide a different insight, a point of view that would be complementary, and really listen to each other, because I think everyone is right in their own point of view. And about what you said earlier on what we need to do forward, I think is just like restructurate the way we think about things and the way we talk about things. For example, as a scientist, we put nature at the center and the ecosystem at the center of everything, because we know that the man depends on it and belongs to it. But maybe many politicians, and I blame the capitalist system, place human above everything and nature as a playground, as a big amount of resources for us to take and to alimentate our power and our growth. But I think that they're thinking and seeing the wrong way, and I think we need to restructure that in every people's minds. As Jack said, we don't talk about costs. We talk about investment for the future. It's not about I don't know. There's too many things to say, but I hope you get what I mean. I think we need to think our problems differently, also as Salome said, and start seeing maybe the ocean and nature not as something separate from us, but something that is connected and intertwined. And I think, yeah, and I'm done. I hope that was clear. It was complete improvisation.
It was. No, it was like a very natural response, and I really appreciate that. And I think that it's really, really connected to everything that was said, and what Jack mentioned before about changing mindset, and about what Salome said about using a different way to think about the problem that exists. So everything is connected, and for instance, we see that COP27 there will be a biodiversity day, and for instance, I myself am really interested in seeing how it evolves, because there will be also a COP15 of the CBD in December, and that will be also a very important step to understand how to better address the combination between all of these crises that are happening. So that's why it's very important to stress. Also, I am speaking as a non-scientist, so I thank the scientists the scientist community to always stressing this point of seeing everything from a different perspective and seeing everything as connected, because without you and without your community, we would not be able or not want to see that, and still we struggle with that. So thank you. And I think that we are almost to the end of this panel, but if you have a final message, if each of you has a final message, my last question would be, what would you say, like a very quick message that you would say to a leader if you met a leader, and what would you say to try and convince them, so to speak, that we have to solve the climate crisis? Of course, it's a very open question, and if anyone wants to take the floor, you are free to do so.
I'm just going to have to grab what I had before and say something along the lines of, if I'm stuck in the lift with them, just sort of say, this is your moment to leave one of the greatest legacies in human history. Like, we're at the point when civilization is massively interconnected, it could well collapse. This is what we need to fix to keep it going. So like, please do, and you'll be remembered for a very long time for doing this if you do.
Yeah, I think for me, for me it would be same as Jack. I would go to them and say, think differently, because what you do right now is not working, and we expect of you more. And you have to do something, because you are the one who have the power to do it, but we depend on you. So think differently, and rethink your way of doing.
Thank you.
If I had one final message, I would tell politics that the ocean represents over 70% of the surface of the Earth. It should be called the planet ocean. And that the air and that the ocean provides over 50% of the oxygen we breathe. That ocean is the primate regulator of the climate, and that the air that we breathe represents for almost 100% of what is livable on this earth, where humans can live and breathe, and see maybe things from this point of view, instead of thinking maybe finance and politics and economy and internal growth.
Think like the ocean instead of thinking like the mainstream politician, right? So thank you all for this session. I think it was really inspiring, and then at the end of this event, we will try and get a few messages to bring out to the world during COP27. So I would like to thank the panelists and thank the people that followed us. Of course, you can still ask questions. If you have a question right now, then I will take it up, but we have 2 minutes. Otherwise, I would say let's proceed with the next panel. Yes, I don't see questions. If the other host wants to confirm that there are no questions. Okay, perfect. We also have a comment. We don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children. Thank you for this thought. With this message, I go to the next panel. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Salome. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Jack. Okay, so as I said before, the next panel is all about meaningful engagement. We already talked about meaningful engagement because, again, everything is connected in this kind of negotiations, and especially when we talk about a youth perspective. But here we have with us young people who want to present their experiences in the field of being engaged or meaningfully engaged or not meaningfully engaged, depending on their experiences in ocean climate processes. So I thank them for being here, and we can proceed with the next with the second panel. So the first person here is Clara. Clara is currently the liaison officer on environmental governance at Youth and Environment Europe. And she will be joining the COP27 conference in the second week. She comes from Brazil, and she is engaged in climate governance with the Climate Governance Initiative, and she is also a campaigner with the World's Youth for Climate Justice. So welcome, Clara, and the floor is yours.
Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone. First of all, I think I just wanted to thank for the other panelists, because it's always very refreshing for me to get to meet new people, even though from a distance, who are also in the same fight, and that end up inspiring me as well. So thank you for that. And well, for my time now here, you asked me specifically about my expectations from COP this year and youth priorities. And I mean, the list is big, right? But I think speaking first of my expectations, to be honest, I think that every young person that I talk to about COP, we're not very hopeful. But then speaking from my side, it's not that I think that the negotiation processes will run smoothly and that we'll have, you know, major advancements, because this is COP27 already. So it's been 27 years trying to advance, but we seem to be stuck in a place. But for me, being in those events, I try to look at the bright side of things, and I always end up meeting new people and new projects and initiatives that have an impact, even if it's in a local scale. So that helps me in, you know, trying to open my mind and remember that there is progress happening, even though not in the scale that I would like them to be happening. So yeah, I think I have mixed expectations. It will be my first COP because of school and uni. I couldn't attend other years. So we'll see. We'll talk. We'll talk about that afterwards. And another expectation in general that I have is that, well, some other panelists mentioned before that this year we'll have for the first time a children and youth pavilion. So, which is already in place, right, for this first week. So I think that we as young people, we're really going to have a central stage in the discussions this year. But then I fear that we might end up being tokenized in a way. And that's an issue that I have in most of these formal events that I end up attending. That is, it's very hard for me to feel that I'm really being listened to and that they're really taking my views and my suggestions into account, and not just, oh, you're a young person, thanks for your, like, for showing your concerns, but we won't do anything about it. So this is something that I think I'll only assess when I'm there in Egypt next week to understand if having this pavilion will actually result in having young people in the negotiation tables as well. So, and then moving on to the priorities, I think this is a key priority, that we are involved in negotiations and we're not there just as observers and taking notes and then bringing them back to our organizations, but that we're actually involved in decision-making processes. And then that's not necessarily only for COP. I think that it's very important that when we go back to our places, to, if it's like in a city scale, if it's in a national scale, that we are there involved, not only voicing our opinions, but that we were helping in constructing policies, for example. So I think that it's really nice, this experience that Olivia mentioned that she had in the European Parliament, because from what I gathered, young people were actually helping developing the policy. So I think that's a key priority for COP this year. And then I guess the second priority I would say is finance, because we have a huge, I mean, the money is out there, but we don't have enough money coming into youth organizations and environmental organizations in general. So of all of the money that is out there being given to NGOs and projects. So yesterday we had the thematic day of finance in COP, and I know that there were some heated debates and protests and all of that, because it is an issue that we've been having and it is a priority. So I think I've exhausted my 5 minutes and I will leave it here. But yeah, I hope we can get to talk more about it afterwards.
No, thank you so much. I think that you even anticipated a few questions that we would discuss later, so don't worry, because we will come back to that. And you already mentioned basically the main points of this discussion, which is meaningful engagement and also the expectations of young people for this conference. And of course, what is needed for us to build our own capacity to be even able to participate and to be physically there. For instance, this year, there has been this huge issue of funding for participating into COP. For many young people, this was not affordable this year. So thank you for raising the finance point. And then coming back to also to the finance issue, I remember from yesterday, there was an intervention by one former colleague from YEE, who is also a member of the Youth Advisory Group to the Secretary General of the United Nations. And they conducted a research last year and realized that basically only 0.7% of all funding, climate funding, goes to youth organizations, which is a very worrying point considering how many youth organizations and youth activists exist in the world, right? So this was really eye-opening also to me. But going to the next panelist. So the next panelist is Letizia. Letizia Artioli is an architect. She works at the intersection of architecture and data, interactive installation in public spaces. She is currently a PhD candidate at the university, the IUAV University of Venice. And her projects focus on dichotomies between data specialization and climate change emergency. She's a Youth for Ocean, Young Ocean advocate, and she's a Young Ocean advocate with her project Venice Climate Change Pavilion. She will be able to say a little bit more about that herself. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much also to the previous panelists. I think I was planning to start by showing something different, but instead I think I will try to connect back the dots and the lines. First of all, I think that one common point of all that has been said is about transcending barriers, starting from Olivia saying that how it is important to transcend disciplines in a way where different domains and matters can actually meld to find new solutions. Actually, new solutions comes from different type of knowledge that are challenged to then work together, because finding new solutions means that the old system and the old problems, and also the previous system from which the problems come from, and I step back in what Jack was saying, like the system from the consumistic Western system from which we come from has bring us to that point. So how can we find new solutions, starting back, of course, not by from what we have been doing until now. Then also my being here means that I'm not a marine biologist, and also I come from a city that paradoxically can be taken as a symbol for all that has been said, like imagining Venice as one of the highest moment of beauty and how the man can coexist with water and ecosystem. We actually assist to the opposite, which means that we have all the major problems of cutting totally the ecosystem problems, like, and the biodiversity loss is totally not considered. We have some of the highest level in air and water pollution, and the mass tourism totally overwhelming the not just the other living beings, but also as humans. So I think that it can be taken as a microcosmos that is actually reflecting all of the problems that are, like, even in a post-pandemic world, we have restarted doing exactly the same. So starting from this point, I would say that also being there and talk, I would take up physical property, which is the one of the ocean and for water, which is transparency. So I would say that actually, like, it's not just a prerogative of water and of marine ecosystem, but is also maybe the prerogative of start seeing and connecting the things in a new way. So as Salome was saying, the interconnection and start being a network and not a pyramid or just a straight line connecting two dots means that when we assist as professionists, as marine biologists, as activists, you start opening the Pandora vase and you find yourself where the data are there, and yet nobody is not just talking about that, but is not showing them in a way through which the people are able to get awareness on how the solutions are possible. Because the solutions are there and we know it, but the step before is that actually these data are not shown in a way that people believe that it's possible to actually tackle these problems. So that's why it's easy also to get back to the older solution and also start, for example, getting back to coal or fossil fuels and start increasing the CO2 emissions is exactly what a scared animal would do, not tracing new paths, but getting back on the old ones. So I'm very thankful for Jack, Olivia, Salome, and Clara for really saying that in their speech, because they are all prism of the same question, which is actually maybe we are talking right now in this moment in different parts of Europe and of the world through a virtual pavilion. And what it is a pavilion about. So the shape of a pavilion is actually something that can be discussed and reinvented in very many ways. I found it and I got in touch with Youth for Ocean Forum, and thank you, Anna, for having me as a panelist, because I found that was necessary to have a spread series of solutions that could live outside the established institutions. So for example, a pavilion means that each one in each city with different actions spreaded in an horizontal way in order to give access to citizens to intergenerational and transdisciplinary ways through different solutions can really connect something. A pavilion is a spread shape that actually is not predefined. And in a virtual way, as if in a physical way, it is really possible to actually maybe start battle and tackle all the problems that we are seeing are not enough listened today and in these COPs and the previous ones. So if, for example, what I really suggest is that I'm going to show a really brief and quick video and an example on how can the awareness of what we all talked through now can be taken, for example, to every citizen, to every person in different cities in a different way, and also to experience that. Because as people know and get to experience something and a problem, but also by being given a solution in a beautiful way, and also the richness of the biodiversity, if we could perceive it, if we could literally get in touch with it, then we get awareness. And from awareness then starts the knowledge and the importance of wanting to save something and to know that we are part of that. So I think that I almost exhausted my time, but I will very quickly just show how it started a new type of pavilion that is gonna get more and more physical and more spread. And also I hope it's gonna be a tool that in this moment connected different realities and is gonna be more and more, for example, a case study and a tool for everybody to mesh and to merge that. Okay. I hope, are you seeing, voila?
Yes.
So the Venice Climate Change Pavilion project that you're seeing here is just an embryo phase of how showing through all the city of Venice in an horizontal way to the citizen, to the tourist, the actual, for example, climate change data crisis that we are assisting, and nobody talks about it. Because when we talk about policies and we talk about transparency, then you really need to get into the mud to then take off the freedom of shapes that is needed to get a better understanding.
Change. This is PM10 and PM2.5 concentration in the air of Venice area. 10 and PM2.5 concentration in the air of Venice area.
Some indicators are very important. For example, the bad air quality can be experienced, and you can see, for example, how polluted the air is in terms of PM10 and PM2.5, which are actually obviously
huge losses of heritage,
the result
culture,
of industrial and
ecosystems,
touristic activities.
Craftsmanships, memory. Tap on solids to see what will disappear. Only the 15% of Venice survives.
This is a prediction
Culture, inhabitants, ecosystems, craftsmanships,
of
memory.
how much
Tap on solids to see what will
is gonna be
disappear.
lost
Only the
if we don't act,
15% of Venice
which means
survives.
that by 2050 we're gonna lose everything, and we will stay with just the 10% of what we are experiencing now in terms also of ecosystems.
Climate change. These are data of exceptional high tide at Venice in November 2019.
So just basically, like, this is a very simple tool that actually, for example, with just 100 QR codes reached more than 3,000 people. And I think that is just a starting point because it's still in the digital world. But what about literally starting doing climate change pavilions in all the cities and give, for example, a panel and a floor to all of us in different cities during the year, because it is exactly outside the events that the battle needs to be tackled. Through the poetry of each day, we literally need to create another system to get the new solutions that we need. So yeah, I invite everybody for further details to search for the Climate Change Pavilion and to experience that. And thank you very much, Anna, for the space given.
Thank you, Letizia. I think that this is an amazing way to see how, like, there are different ways to raise awareness of the public and of the decision makers as well, of the risks and of the predictions about the future that are already there. It's really interesting, and I suggest everybody to check it out. And it's interesting to hear about how you use the science that is already there, basically, to create this tool. And another important point that you raised was to give space for young people or for scientists and experts to talk about it every day, basically, all throughout the year. This is so important because even COP is just the conference, but negotiations on climate and on other issues that have to do with the environment are going on throughout the year. And it's important that we are involved in the conversation. And I connect this point to what Clara said before about being involved as young people also in the decisions that happen at the local level, which is super important, and at the national level, of course. So thank you both. And I would like to invite also Joe to take the floor. Joe Wilkins is a Welsh ecologist. He is a nature campaigner. He has a background in system ecology and a passion to achieve a greater youth involvement and empowerment in conservation and environmental governance. Joe works as a conventions and policy officer at Reserva, the Youth Land Trust. He is head of campaigning at UK Youth for Nature, and is a former member of World Ocean Day, Youth Advisory Council, and Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force. Thank you, Joe, for joining our panel, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you everybody who's been before, and thank you, Leticia, for the excellent summary that's already been done of everybody's talk. I'm actually joining from a youth COP that's being held here in Wales, in the city of Cardiff. So apologies if you can hear some music going on in the background. There's some fun events going on around the back. But I think, although it presents a bit of a logistical nightmare trying to balance virtual and reality, I think it actually being here kind of encapsulates that there is a definite shift towards better inclusion of youth in these spaces. It's perhaps not going as fast as we would like it to, and it perhaps isn't as ambitious as we would like it to be, but there are steps being made. Like these youth events that are being thrown are great opportunities for networking, they're great opportunities for capacity building. And I think that is a really, it should be celebrated. I'm not saying that youth inclusion is where it needs to be, but at least we are stepping in the right direction. In the work that I do, I like to draw quite a clear distinction between inclusion and participation. Some people, might not agree with the sort of differentiation, but I like to think of inclusion as almost the seat at the table. But then for meaningful participation, that's got to come with resources. It has to come with funding. It has to come with actually welcoming people into the space. It's all good me saying, there's a seat for youth at the table, but if it's, for example, COP27, where it's inaccessible because of cost, because it's inaccessible because of distance, digital stuff, like the seat can't be taken, or it will be taken by a certain demographic of youth. For genuine youth participation, it has to be followed up with putting your money where your mouth is. But it's not just money, it's also the resources, it's also the knowledge, it's also, when it comes to events, say UNEA that I was at earlier, it's the knowledge of how to engage, not just saying, there is a seat. It's, well, where can I actually put my hand up and say, hey, I'd like to speak? Where am I allowed to do that? That's knowledge that isn't readily available. And as someone who's come from more of a science background as lots of the others, I don't know, what all these different terms mean, and I don't know what where to get involved. So I think that's why I like to always have a step between inclusion, which is great, but it's that next step of how do we help young people take that seat at the table? What steps need to be done? And that applies not just to youth, but it applies to many groups that have been marginalized in the past. It's nice inviting, but if people can't take that seat, then it's still an empty seat, and an empty seat is just as good as no seat. It needs that real people behind it. And I think this is especially true when we talk about the ocean, because for many the ocean is very distant. Ocean science can be extremely gatekept, because if you can't afford to get on a boat, you might not feel like you can get involved in ocean science. So it's this push on following through with your invitation is what I really want to see moving forward. And I guess that I'll kind of keep mine short so we can get to some questions, but that is my focus. Is I'm glad that there's the first step being taken in many cases, but I think there needs to be that next step of what can world leaders, what can generations above actually do to help facilitate youth engagement, rather than just saying, here's a seat. It's what is that next step? I think that's my takeaway from there. But yeah, I'll end there so we can go on to some questions. And again, the music has started and I will have to run shortly, but I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Joe. I hope that you are not missing too much of the party. But yeah, it's always a bit of a struggle now that we are living in both in a digital and in a in-person kind of event world. So yeah, I know what it means. So I really appreciate that you're still here with us. But yeah, in order to start a conversation and yeah, get to the core of our panel, I wanted to, yeah, well, first of all, to ask everyone, and maybe I will start with you, Joe. What are basically the best ways, or what is according to you and to your experience, the way and the instruments that we have, especially as young people, to raise awareness in the public on one hand, and also to help raise ambition of policymakers in the ocean sphere, but also in general in nature negotiations, since you have experience in all of that. I know that we already addressed that in a way, also with your speeches, but if there's anything concrete that you wanted to share, that would be great.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, is it, trying to encapsulate in one sentence. I think my thing for, like, when I speak to, you know, as my sort of mission as a young person advocating for ocean change, but also what I tell to others is, you know, don't let your passion be bridled a little bit. Do keep going at it. I think the benefit that young people do have is that we can be incredibly ambitious. We don't, you know, we haven't quite, a lot of us haven't quite got into the nitty-gritty of the economics and stuff. And I feel like you might call that naivety, but I also feel there's a real strength in that. It's like an informed passion. You know, we know we're not going to be able to achieve everything, but if we start coming in with a kind of, well, it'd be nice if we protected this much, or it'd be nice if we did this, like, you're already on a bit of a losing streak. Whereas if you come in and say, look, we have to do this, this is how we do it, go in with some real, like, oomph. And it's hard because you get knocked down constantly, but I think once we lose that sort of drive, then the people we're kind of fighting against, if you want to, you know, put it in that sort of language, have a quite strong ground. If we go in with a very weak ground, you know, kind of already compromising, then we're going to meet closer to them. If we go in here somewhere, at least we'll meet somewhere closer to the middle. And I think that's be my advice, is don't be, you know, naive, but also don't mistake naivety as try and be passionate as well, and try and find that balance. It's not very concrete answer, but at least that's what I try and instill in people and talk to, is to be bold, make some, you know, things. If someone's like, well, why have we can't afford that? And I'll be like, well, why? And they're like, oh, it's because we are giving tax breaks to certain individuals. And they're like, well, should you be giving them tax breaks? And they go, maybe not. But if you'd have gone in with, oh, that's fair enough, yeah, no, don't worry about it, like, you've lost that drive. And if you go in with enough drive, people will kind of come with you, or at least some people will. But yeah, not very concrete, but that would be my biggest advice, is don't lose that passion when you get into this space, because it's hard not to.
No, that's a brilliant point, actually. And I think that as young people now, we are even expected to be bold. And I think that we are the kind of stakeholder that can be bold and make like more ambitious proposals, and then the policymakers go back and negotiate that. But I think that this is also our role in a way, to try and always be more ambitious, and try and, because this is the way that we gain the attention even of the policymaker. I don't know if that's something that you share, but I seem to understand that this is also your message. So thank you so much. And if you need to, I know that you need to go in a bit, but if you need to go, it is okay. In the meanwhile, I wanted to ask another question to Letizia. Letizia, since we are talking about what we can do in order to raise ambition, I wanted to ask you, why do you think it's important to raise awareness of the public in order to bring the ambition forward in the policy-making process, in these conferences that have to do with the ocean and climate? What is the role, for instance, of ocean literacy, which is basically what your project is about, right?
Yeah, we will call it ocean and climate change literacy as soon as it will. So first of all, because politicians without people do nothing usually, because the biggest revolutions are made by people. And actually, so I think that if politicians, like, the power is based on very, very small shifts that then actually becomes bigger waves. So if actually, I think I think we should think as if our institutionalization, sorry, because the word is very complex, is actually to put ourselves, the bigger we grow, in smaller boxes. It means that, for example, as a young person that can be passionate, and that's why I also connect to what it has just been said, why we lose ambition, why we lose passion, or why it is difficult to keep it high. First of all, because usually the bigger you dream, the smaller is the box in which you're put, because you become then a citizen, and as a citizen you're not represented. And so when there it starts the fact of why what I perceive to be ethic and right is not being done, because I'm not represented. So how can I be represented? But the step before is, what do I want, not just as a citizen, not just as a young person, not just as a biologist, as a human being. So to reconnect, not just to the ocean, but especially to the environment, like it's compulsory, it is necessary, it is evident that we literally need to identify ourselves more and more as citizens. So as political beings having a power, as also Jack was saying, who you vote is going to represent what you want to see in the world, but you yourself, by acting and engaging and thinking and putting outside the questions that are not being said, or if these questions are not being said, maybe it's because the main and important questions are not being asked, or they are silent. So I think that to identify ourselves as human being and citizen and raise awareness about that is fundamental, because as soon as you show the beauty of that, the beauty of what we belong, because we belong to an ecosystem with which richness I don't even have the word to say. You need to show it, you need to experience, you need to live it. And as soon as the people get that, then it becomes. So that's why awareness is fundamental, because without awareness, you feel that other people will decide for you, and other people may not have the priorities that we feel that are the most important, because we have a bigger vision and they are in smaller boxes. So I feel that this is kind of the image that I want to say. And thanks very much, Iwana, for the Antoine de Saint-Exupéry quote, that it's how we inherit the world from our children and not from our ancestor. If I would say an important quote is that questioning the ostensibly unquestionable premises of our way of life is arguably the most urgent of service we owe to our fellow humans and ourselves. And this is from Zygmunt Bauman. And I feel that questioning and going outside the box and transcend all these barriers, which is also like, the more you go to the ocean, the more you feel that you are part of the ocean. So the barrier between you, yourself and the other becomes totally like dissolves. So we should start dissolving and transcend all the barriers that are opposing or that are interfering to our action, because it's through that we can start having a change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is really inspiring, I think, also towards the end of our discussion. And yeah, overcoming barriers, and again, like you said before, thinking like a network and not like a pyramid, and thinking about all of the connections that exist even among us as stakeholders, but also among the crises and the challenges that exist in the world that are connected to the climate crisis. I think this was part of, like, I think I start wrapping up, but before doing that, I wanted to quickly go to Clara, and yeah, I wanted to ask Clara as well what she thinks about how we can, yeah, raise awareness and what we can do as young people to do that. And how we can build capacity. Of course, you already replied and you already said about the climate finance issue, and especially what goes into young people's project, basically, but how we can move forward with this, yeah, with youth and building capacity of youth.
I think that keeping it short, it's a question of, not a question, but I think that when people understand their dependence on nature and how everything is interconnected, that's how we can engage themselves, because then there are feelings and emotions in the middle. And I think that's why talking about intersectionality is so important, because then it doesn't matter if you consider yourself an environmentalist, if you're a scientist, if you work with environmental governance. When people see that everything is linked to the climate crisis, then they start to care about it. So if you're an athlete, I don't know, maybe you're a surfer, you're going to understand that your profession, your passion is going to be impacted by what's happening. If you are, I don't know, a doctor, you're going to see how many more people are coming because of health issues, of accidents that are going to happen. So only two examples, you know. So I think that answering to your question on how we can raise awareness and have more people engaged, I think it's this. It's only when they feel their link and they feel that they are a part of the system. And I love that we discussed systems before. I think that's the thing. And Jack had already mentioned the importance of psychology, right? And that's one of my quests at the moment, understanding which narrative people can connect the most with. And then art, for example, is a great way. So I was very glad that Leticia brought here the artistic perception on that. I think we need to find, I think we have found the ways, but it's using new forms to connect with people so that they can truly feel like they're in this conundrum as well. And it doesn't matter their field of expertise or their interest in life, they have a role to play as well. So yeah, keeping it short.
Thank you so much. It's basically also the role of storytelling and how we can create a narrative that can actually capture other people's attention and that deal with their emotions, right? And this is also what we are doing with the Youth for Ocean Forum, and we are trying to do with our projects and our collaborations on storytelling and ocean literacy. So yeah, this was a very interesting conversation. So many points that were raised, and I'm really sorry that we have to wrap up, but I hope that this will have a follow-up, first of all, and that this will be brought into other conversations, and then we can continue not only talking about this, but also starting to work together towards creating the change that we want as young people. So first of all, I thank the panelists of panel 2 I know that Joe had to leave, but I want to thank all of you. Panel 2, panel 1, thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to wrap up by saying that it's really difficult. It's a really difficult mission for me to take everything together and create a final message, because we have so much to say as young people. We have so much energy and so many messages that we want to communicate. But first of all, a common point was to start changing our mindset and everyone's mindset, so policy makers' mindsets, to better understand from a different perspective what the climate crisis is and how it is connected to the ocean, for instance, since we are in the virtual ocean pavilion and we're talking about oceans, but really changing the mindset, but also changing the way in which we communicate, both between us, among stakeholders, between the stakeholders and the policymakers, and yeah, changing also the vision that we have on the relationship between the scientist and the policymaker. So everything is connected, and therefore, if we don't make all of these changes, it's difficult to see how things can go ahead and be positively affected. But I really hope that this conversation was a way to, yeah, start, raising those points to address the challenges from a youth perspective. Of course, this should be part of a bigger conversation with other generations as well. So thank you so much again, and I wish everyone a very nice day.
Thank you for sharing, Anna.
Thank you very much, Anna, for inviting us, and thank you for interconnecting again so many different realities and let us give a floor to speak outside the box. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the other panelists. Hope to see you soon.
And thanks to the audience for staying with us.